Welcome into The Bank, a show which covers the Baltimore Ravens and the NFL. The Bank is part of BSL Radio. Baltimore Sports and Life is dedicated to analysis and discussion on the Baltimore Orioles, the Ravens, and the University of Maryland. The site has a team of writers providing coverage of those teams and houses live streaming content weekly. Join the conversations at the message board, like BSL on Facebook, and follow BSL on Twitter.
Welcome into The Bank. I'm joined by my colleagues, Mike Randall and Jamie Seek. We'll get to them in 1 second. First, a word from the sponsor, Mercer Floor and Home Carpet One. They're a third-generation family business. Established in 1959, they're located on Main Street in beautiful, historic downtown Westminster. They're the oldest floor covering store in Carroll County and one of Maryland's longest-running flooring businesses. For all your flooring needs, think Mercer Floor and Home Carpet One. So, guys, we're a week closer to the start of this 21 season, and we're all excited about that. And we're all rightfully down about the injury to J.K. Dobbins, which will have him out all of this year. So, instead of just wallowing in that injury completely, we're going to get into kind of calibrating just, how big of a loss is it, and how did the Ravens adjust? And, interest you guys have maybe in the free agents that have been mentioned, Gurley or Bell. And if you did add a free agent, would you want to carry four backs on the roster? So, Mike, we'll let you go ahead and lead things off there with just kind of, general thoughts. The injury is significant, and just initial thoughts about going forward.
Yeah, it's certainly a big loss. He's somebody that I've said on here before I expected to really break out this year. That if this was a system where he was the Derrick Henry of the system and getting 25 rushes a game, and we didn't have a mobile quarterback, that I think he would go for 2,500 yards this year, all-purpose yards. That he was that kind of back with that kind of ability to run inside, outside. They were going to get him more into the passing game this year. It's going to be a big loss, but not one the Ravens can't overcome. I made a note about Edwards. A lot of people think he's just kind of a bowling ball. He just kind of runs straight up the gut, and that's basically what he does as a complement to what Dobbins can do. It's really not the case. When you look at Pro Football Focus had a run direction breakdown on the running backs. So last year, Edwards up the middle ran 41 times for 3.8 yards per carry. Off guard went 26 times for 4.1 yards a carry. Off tackle went 25 times for 7 yards a carry. And then basically running to the outside, so off the tight end on sweeps and things like that, he ran 70 of those for 5.2 yards a carry. So his yards per carry were better on the outside than they were going straight ahead. Now, some of those going straight ahead is they call on him on 3rd and 2 to pick up 3 yards and move the chains, things of that nature. So, that's going to be a factor. But I think to say Edwards can't do what Dobbins does is kind of discredits him a little bit. I think he deserves the chance to be an every down back. I like what I saw from Tyson Williams. He's got the speed to be able to gain the edge and get around the corner too, like what I saw from him in preseason. It's a loss, but not one the Ravens can't overcome.
Yeah, that's kind of I guess that's where I kind of land, and Jamie, we'll get right to your thoughts there. But, I went into the year thinking Dobbins had a chance to, when probably was going to end this year as the Ravens' best premier skilled position talent. I do think they can kind of get past the injury at some level, but, I don't want to just dismiss, what the injury is. I mean, I kind of go back and forth here. It's a very significant injury. Yeah, you still have the best running quarterback in the league. You still have a running back that's run for 5 yards per carry the last 2 years, and you have a scheme that I think is going to allow for production overall from maybe a couple of the other backups or potential free agents they bring in. But big loss just on Dobbins' ability, right, Jamie?
Yeah, of course. We were all we've been talking about Dobbins all off season. We were excited about the potential, hearing all the things about using him in the passing game, et cetera, et cetera. But lest we forget, 2 years ago, the Ravens set the league all-time rushing record with Mark Ingram as their lead back. And then last year, Mark Ingram basically got, put on ice because of, obviously because of J.K. Dobbins, but it goes to show you that within the framework of Roman's system, I don't want to quite put it in Gary Kubiak territory yet, with plug and play nature, but I kind of have a sense that we're going to be able to do that when we saw with the unheralded guys, Nate McCrary, of course, who was cut today, and with Tyson Williams was able to do in the preseason. The only one of the things I thought was interesting, I took a look at what we did last year as far as carries, how they broke down. Jackson had the most carries with 159. Then it was Edwards with $144. Dobbins had 134. Ingram had 72, and Hill had 12. And there was probably some other random carries from receivers. I didn't look at those. But I don't see that distribution changing all that much. Obviously, the names will change a little bit. Obviously, 17-game season, so we'll get an extra carry, a few extra carries here and there. Unless they plan on featuring Edwards more and kind of, instead of it being like a kind of a 40-40 split amongst the two backs, whereas, obviously Lamar's going to get a lot of action and then, he'll see some. But I don't see why they can't give Williams, 125, 130 carries and keep that workload pretty similar. Because I don't necessarily know that I want Edwards getting 300, 350 carries or anything this year. I mean, maybe you guys feel differently, but I think the system has worked like this with the rotation, and I think they stick with it. Again, you lose a player of his potential, of Dobbins' potential, it sucks. But ultimately, I think they're going to be able to fill in the blanks with who they have in house, and just the fact that you have number 8 at quarterback, that's always the X factor.
Just my thought on the carries. I would like to see rotationally to start the year, and if you if you want to lean on Gus as you get to late December and have the carries pick up, then I would be I'd be good. I guess my thought there is just you lose Dobbins, you don't just lose his ability, you lose his availability, and you can't. If you were to lose Gus, then your offense goes into a it
Right.
looks way different. So I'm trying to protect him, getting him through the year, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Micah. Sorry, Mike, you had mentioned the idea of using him as a workhorse. I think he certainly has the body type that could stand up, bigger body, could give him more carries. Give the argument for just going ahead and riding him to start the year.
Edwards, you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he deserves the shot to do that, especially with these younger guys that you don't want to put too much of the workload maybe on them too early on, or expose them too early on. I think it was probably by design that we didn't even see J.K. Dobbins as much until I think the Colts game last year. It was around week 7, week 8, when finally Mark Ingram took a back seat, even though Dobbins in the little amount of play he got showed that he should be the lead back. I think it's by design so they're fresher later in the year. So I think Edwards has played full seasons at this point. I think I'd be comfortable giving him a heavy share of the load early on, and let some of the younger guys start rotating in smaller bits and pieces, and then maybe increasing their workload if they deserve it, and then taking a little bit of the pressure off Gus as the season goes on, unless he's just tearing it up and just being a monster like a Derrick Henry.
What do you guys feel about Dobbins just being in the game to begin with? I mean, it's football. Injuries happen. It's a physical game.
Yeah.
And but you had all of camp to acclimate to some level of hitting. And he's one of your stars, and you lose him not in a game that counts, but just in a meaningless exhibition. So I could argue either side towards, hey, things happen. But part of me is just irritated that he goes out there.
Yeah, I think you wanted to see your starting offense against another team's defense one time because they put the starting offensive line out. They had everybody out there except for the wide receiver core being shallow, as it was with injury. But they had the offensive line out there and Lamar Jackson out there. I think they just wanted to see what the starting lineup could look like once against somebody, trying to hurt them. Whereas in camp, it's you're not really trying to. I mean, they're making tackles in camp. It's full contact. But I think what the issue might be is when you get to play another team, guys might be a little more careless in how they tackle, so to speak, because they're trying to make a play. If they come in low, it doesn't bother them. Whereas, the little time I spent at Towson, if someone came in low in practice or in camp on a tackle, they got an earful from the coaches about doing something like that. Maybe at Ravens camp it's the same way because it's your guys. They want to teach fundamental tackling. You come in low, you risk knocking somebody out for the season. You get an earful for it. When you're out there playing another team, they come in low. Maybe it's them trying to make the team, and they're not going to hear about it. So that may be the risk you run versus the argument of like, hey, this could have happened in practice.
Jamie, there's been talk on the board, potential interest in Gurley or Bell. Of those two free agents, who interests you more?
Yeah, can there be an option C? None of the above.
Of those two options, who interests you more?
Of those two options, if I had to gun to my head, I would say Todd Gurley for the simple fact that Le'Veon Bell's been kind of a knucklehead, and Gurley has some, which I didn't know until he visited earlier in the year. Apparently, he has some local ties. He's from the area. He just seems like he would be a guy that would be content to be in a role, as a deep reserve because that's what whomever comes in would be. Now, again, I don't know whether Le'Veon Bell at this stage in his career would still, as again, be a knucklehead. But if I had to choose one of them, if it was a healthy Todd Gurley, unfortunately, we don't have a time machine to have a first round fantasy draft Todd Gurley anymore. But yeah, I'm not really interested. But I think he would be maybe a slightly better fit.
Yeah, I guess I leaned to Gurley as well, but maybe Bell the better pass catcher, and if he is a knucklehead, at this point in his career, the Ravens could quickly just move him out.
Yeah.
So
I think I'd be more comfortable going to war with what we have.
Yeah, I could see that. I think I'd rather have, for myself, we can get into roster construction here as we go, and I'll just get into this question. I'd like to see just go ahead and grab whichever free agent you prefer, or swing a trade for another back, and have and go with four.
I also guess it depends on how hurt Justice Hill is too. I mean, we haven't heard much about even the nature of that injury, and I guess tomorrow will be when the IR decisions come down, or will we start hearing any of that tonight? I wasn't quite sure. But I mean, obviously, I know they had to get to 53, but I guess they'll start declaring guys IR next 24 hours or so.
Yeah, let's get to Hill just in 1 second, and that's
All
my
right.
question there. You got one of you mentioned Ingram. I think it was you, Jamie.
Yeah.
Certainly, he looked done with us last year, leg wise. Wasn't a whole lot of burst. Don't imagine it looks better this year, but he did looks like he is making the Houston uh, squad, but they're carrying 5 backs.
Yeah.
So I would think he's available. Plus, a lot of their, obviously the Ravens connection with their.
Are they just going to run the wing T or something?
Yeah, it's just interesting. If you just wanted to have another veteran and somebody that was certainly aware of your scheme, maybe he's available.
And he fits. I mean, he fits here as far as fitting in the, with the locker room and everything. I think that also comes down to a question of salary too. I mean, what are we looking at maybe about 3.5, $4 million under the cap, roughly?
Yep.
I think that was around the number. We got 17 games to get through. They're gonna. I mean, I think you're gonna see they're gonna have to make a move or two anyway with some contracts, just because you'd like to have a couple more bucks going into the season because you're gonna need that space here or there. And obviously, if they sign a back, it's gonna have to be for sure on the cheap. But at this point in time, I think they'll probably get through week one because then you can get that where you sign guys after week one. It's that smaller percentage hit against the cap or whatever, non-guaranteed, or I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but you're better if you get them after week one.
Yeah, great points overall, Jamie. Just about the cap and just being realistic about what is is and is not affordable for the Ravens. Mike, Jamie had kind of mentioned, tomorrow roster has to be trimmed down to 53. Questions about who will make the roster, and then their subsequent designations. Hill, as you mentioned in your write up, not the best camp, and questions the first 2 years as a pro of his actual running ability. Last year, he did step forward and was pretty strong on special teams. If he's healthy, does he make the roster? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, well, he made the roster. They cut down to 53 today at 4. So
Okay,
he's
I'm sorry.
yeah, no. So they cut down to 53 today. So he's made it for now. But like Jamie said, could he be one of those guys that they IR tomorrow, which would be by 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock tomorrow. Well, this is going to be heard tomorrow. So at 4 p.m. on Wednesday is when the waiver period ends. So players that are not claimed or vested veterans that went unsigned can sign with other teams to go to their practice squads. So if that's where we're going to see the Bateman move, the Nick Boyle move, likely Jimmy Smith a candidate, Justice Hill also a candidate for something like that, Miles Boykin a candidate to go to IR for 3 weeks. And then maybe they bring back guys that they cut today, like Anthony Levine, Pernell McPhee, Michael Schofield, maybe one of those guys. So that's when they're going to bring back some of those guys, and maybe if they do keep Hill on the roster as a special teamer, Nate McCrary could be a third running back as well. That kind of had some good tape in the preseason, and maybe he's your third running back. Whereas they really like Hill for his special teams ability. Maybe Hill just doesn't factor into the running back conversation at all.
Yeah, if he's going to be on the team, to me he needs to be part of the running back conversation.
Yeah, he really wasn't last year. And also, when you think about it, you have Lamar Jackson gets a third of the carries. So it's almost like Lamar and Gus are your two lead backs. And then Tyson Williams would be your third back. And then Hill would be your fourth back, if you think of it that way. But
which is pretty much the structure they had last year. Because
right.
the way now again, Ingram kind of eventually got to the point where he was deactivated on game day and Hill was up, but obviously he was only playing on teams and whatnot. But of course, you said about McCrary, Mike, and I agree with you. But then you worry, did he put enough on tape that he's going to get claimed?
Right.
Which
we'll find out tomorrow.
Right. Obviously, we'll find out.
Or today when you guys are listening to this.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, your point there, Mike, is well taken. The fact that Hill didn't factor into the running game last year, but now your bodies have changed. So
yeah, true.
To me, he's a little bit different. I mean, again, the whole reason you drafted him was the idea of his speed, and they watched what he did. Of course, Big 12 and the lack of defense there, but they were able to find the ball, get him the ball in space. And could you take advantage of a little bit of that here? Haven't seen it so far as a pro, but when you drafted Dobbins, the whole copycat league, and the idea was how much speed can the Ravens put out on the field at one time, and they still have a productive back in Edwards, but they don't have Dobbins speed. So we'll see if he can factor, see what his health is. You mentioned some of the other health questions the Ravens are looking at. Mike, I'm just going to have you just kind of run through that quickly, kind of run through the decisions and how you see it playing out with Bateman, Smith, and Boyle.
Yeah, so Bateman, they said his injury would be the groin injury. He had like a small surgery on it, looks like. They said he'd be back in September, quote unquote. So uh, they could put him on IR with the injured reserve rules. They can come, any number of players can come back after 3 weeks on IR. So that would take him up to week 4, which is October 3rd. I don't see the need to rush Bateman back. Even if you think he's gonna be ready week 1 and you don't, or week 2 and you don't IR him, but he sits week 1 and he's ready week 2. Like, just, I wouldn't rush it. Put him on IR. Give him 3 weeks off. Have him start week 4. It's a long season. It's a marathon. He's gonna be more important to the team in November and December than he is in September and October. So he's one of those guys. Nick Boyle. Going to be incredibly important to get back to aid in the running game with his run blocking. Another one not to rush back if you. So he's another one that I wouldn't mind giving three games off to. Jimmy Smith is another one of those candidates. Not sure where he's at with his ankle injury. They've been kind of hush hush about all that stuff. Same thing with Justice Hill. They call it minor. He misses 2 games, and we haven't heard anything since. So we may hear more about these injuries the closer we get to kickoff of the regular season. But those guys, and unless I'm missing somebody, Miles Boykin, hamstring injuries, I guess those things could be finicky. He's another one that's a candidate to land on IR, take 3 weeks off to start the season, which would with him and Bateman, that really elevates Tyler and Wallace right away. James Prochet, who's been hot-handed through camp and the preseason, elevates him. Makes your free agent acquisition and Sammy Watkins a top target. And Hollywood Brown did return to practice this past week, so he would be your wide receiver 1, I would assume, going into week 1. But with those 5 guys, that allows you to bring back some guys you cut, a couple of guys from the practice squad that you would that you claim that you may call up that you liked in preseason but didn't want to quite give up on yet, and you hope to claim those guys back tomorrow. So
Jamie, of some of the names you're seeing released around the league as teams set their rosters, who interests you of anybody that you've seen?
I looking through the only name that really jumped out as far as something that we could use and that would fit was offensive tackle Carson Green. He went undrafted, but they had some people had as high as a 4th-round grade on him. He was a 3-year starter in college, guy that could be, and we don't really have a pure backup tackle. Maybe if they're still looking for that, because obviously, Jawan James was brought in. They're hoping maybe he'll be back or he could be available like week 10 or so. But in the interim, if anything happens, it's Makari or Tyree Phillips, and neither one of those guys has exactly impressed at tackle. So I still am a little nervous about the tackle depth, but at this point, I don't think you're going to really find anything out in the free agent market that's going to be like, oh man, that's the guy, because these are all, mostly back end of the roster types that are out there. So other than that, nobody jumped off the page for me.
Mike, anybody for you?
Yeah, Green was one. The only other guy that jumped out was also offensive tackle Tyrell Crosby. Only thing that they mentioned about him was a solid pressure, the amount of pressures that he allowed as a swing tackle and then as a starting tackle last year, playing about 400 or some snaps for playing most of the year. And then he's a former 5th-round pick, so somebody that was drafted in 2018 by the Lions. So yeah, I mean, just offensive tackle. I really don't think Tyree Phillips is that guy. Makari, versatile, but he's also not that guy that if we lose Stanley or Villanueva, I want to bank on being stepping in and playing that position. Yeah, I think it's nice that they kept Tristan Colon on the roster for the 53 man. He might be one of those guys that goes down if they bring somebody else in because they have the 9 offensive linemen right now. They may roll with 8 on the 53 man and move him back down. But I just don't like the idea of Phillips being our swing tackle.
ESPN had their list of the top 100 players entering the year. Jackson, the highest Raven, number 22. Mike, what were your thoughts there?
I'm okay with him being the highest Raven. I think the two quarterbacks were ranked too high above him. Kyler Murray was 21. I think he should definitely be below Jackson. Jackson's done it for 2 years, Murray for one, and Murray had someone like named DeAndre Hopkins, who's pretty good to throw to. So um, Jackson's just better overall. I know they expect Murray to take that next step and be great, and he's a great quarterback, but Jackson is ahead of him for sure. And Dak Prescott at 12, like really, Dak Prescott at 12. As long as he's been around, he wins games against bad teams. He doesn't show up against good teams, and he missed almost all of last year. He missed like 12 games last year. So, what did he do last year to show that he's should be ranked that high up there with Mahomes and Rodgers and the like on that tier of quarterback? So, I'm going to go ahead and say that Jackson should be higher than Prescott, higher than Kyler Murray, but hard to argue against some of the other position players ahead of him on that list. I mean, you'd be splitting hairs against, say your Stephon Diggs or your TJ Watts and your Bosa brothers and those guys if you're trying to compare positions and things of that nature.
Jamie, the top 100. Any Ravens notes for you?
I don't know. I always look at these top 100 lists kind of like when you ask somebody what their favorite band is, like, who's right, who's wrong. You like vanilla, I like chocolate. I mean, that's fine. You can have your vanilla as long as I can have my chocolate.
Did you say Vanilla Ice is your favorite band? You were
yeah,
up.
right.
I didn't catch that. Let me get that.
Just get that on tape. I mean, these are voted on by the players, as I recall, right? In this NFL Network one, or isn't there a player vote involved in this top 100 list, or is it entirely?
Yeah, the NFL Network one is the players vote on it. I think this was ESPN's.
ESPN's. I'm sorry,
ESPN put this one together.
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult to compare guys at different positions too. Like, how do you compare TJ Watt to Lamar Jackson? They do totally different things. They impact the game in totally different ways. I would almost like these, if they would do these things, rank them by position, because I feel like it's a lot easier to, make some sort of a comparison. But yeah, I can echo Mike's sentiments on that. You'd like, and what, Humphrey was the other player on there, like 37, I believe.
Something like
and
that.
Yeah, and and the rest of the guys, it's like, obviously we know there's good players, but also there's, like Mark Andrews is good, but there's like 3 tight ends that you could probably argue are better than him. So, very subjective.
Yeah, Humphrey was. I was curious for your mention. I mean, there's been some conjecture this summer that he could be in the defensive player of the year running. Which it's part production, it's part name recognition, and it's part what your team does. So,
Yeah. And I don't think he mouths off enough, quite frankly. He's very uncornerback like.
Yeah.
Most of the time these cornerbacks are kind of like receivers. They have a little bit of diva in them and they, flap their gums a lot. He doesn't do that. He just goes out and performs. And that's boring, when you're talking about on things.
Let's roll through a couple of over-unders, just a little fun. Just kind of start at the top. We'll get firmer predictions next week, but over-under 12 Ravens wins. Jamie, you can start.
I'm going to drink the purple Kool-Aid. I'm going over. I think we get to 13.
Mike?
Yeah, I'm going to say over as well. I think that's right about where the line should be, if you ask me.
All right. And before we move on there, just a quick thought. The Dobbins injury, where would you have set the line prior to Dobbins going down?
I'd have had it in the same. I'd have had it right around the same place. Like I said, I'm impacted. Losing Dobbins is tough, but I think the system can overcome it.
And of course, it's a 17-game season, so
Right.
12 and 5.
Right.
Yeah.
You should have said it at 12.5, Chris. Made it harder.
Yeah. Right. There you go. Edwards, and if he is the fully back, 1,200 yards, reasonable expectation. Yes. It's who's taking higher or lower? Who are doing there?
I'll go. I'll take the over. And it wouldn't be a huge increase in carries based on his career averages for him to get there. If he rushed 231 times at his career average, he gets there.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over too. 1,200 yards is 70 a game. Uh, even though other guys are going to cut into it, the Ravens are going to rush for about 200 a game or 190 a game. I think Gus will account for at least 70 a game, so I'll take the over.
All right. Jackson, 35 combined TDs.
Well, so far in his career, combined 43 touchdowns in 19, and 33 and 20. So I'll take the over.
Yeah, I'll take the over as well.
Yeah, I think that was pretty clear. I have seen, I've been watching too much of Get Up and the commentators there in the morning talk about Jackson. And I believe last week they set it under 30, which seemed low to me. But we'll
Wow.
see. And they were taking the under based off of the supporting cast, I believe.
That's funny.
The supporting cast is better this year than it's been. And okay, never mind. Go ahead.
And the extra game. And,
right.
yeah.
Right. All right.
Yeah, the extra game is that does really kind of throw you a little bit. So I'd said 375 carries for Jackson, but instead of that, we'll on the flip change that to somebody can do the math real quick.
175? Is that more likely?
Yeah.
375 carries would be 22 a game. That's a bit. 175 carries, about 10 a game.
I completely did not mean 375.
Yeah,
I
was like, man,
I figured that was a
that
typo.
I was thinking the over and under of 12 carries a game, which is 204.
That's under.
Yeah, it's going to be under, but I also wonder if we run into a situation where Gus misses some time, how much more Lamar is going to have to run if the other guys don't stand up.
Yeah.
But for all things being equal, I would take about the under on the 12 carries a game.
Yeah, because also
but it'll be more like 10. So
yeah, does the passing game?
I'm really curious to see what the average looks like by the end of September, because I'm thinking the first few weeks of the year is just the Jackson show, and just
I agree. He might be on pace for 375 carries after the first month of the season, but I think it'll come down.
That'd be awesome. Jackson goes for 2,000 yards on the ground.
Yeah.
Right. All right, Hollywood Brown, 70 catches, over under.
I actually wrestled with this one a little bit. I ended up going under. He did get 100 targets last year though, but not a lot of catches. But so it's the potential's there, but I'm going to say under.
Yeah, I think it's going to be just under. I think just because the addition of Bateman is going to eat into some of those targets. Andrews is going to get his fair share. I just think that it's going to eat into a little bit of his target share this year, and he's going to be more, I guess, the second or third option, whereas last year was kind of relied on as the first. So
I don't know exactly where Hollywood is health wise right now and where he's going to be on week one. But if he doesn't take advantage of maybe Bateman being out maybe the first few weeks, and take advantage of, hey, Dobbins is out and we need our best skill position guys to step up and be playmakers, that would be pretty disappointing to me if he's not a 70 catch guy here in year three. And I think you guys both posed legitimate reasons why it could be, and he could still impact the offense overall. But we'll see. Watkins, and I just set the over under there, 14 games that he lines up.
Yeah, I took the under. I barely under though. I think he's gonna be enough. He's gonna be around enough that he's gonna be an impact, but I still think he's gonna miss a couple games just because that's kind of his MO.
Yeah, I'm taking the under on the sole fact that if you bet with the trend, you can only lose once. So that's why I picked the under. But I hope it's over. I hope he plays all 17 games and more. Knock on wood.
So I plan to have maybe basically all over unders this week, but the Dobbins news, obviously we had to discuss that. So next week we'll do some more. Hopefully, be a little bit more fun and light. The only other thing I'll say about Dobbins is, year 2 ACL reminds of Jamal Lewis and him blowing out his ACL and maybe costing the Ravens a chance to repeat that year. But hey, Jamal came back and he had a pretty solid career. JK can do the same same thing.
Absolutely.
We'll be excited to see him next fall. Certainly down about losing him, but the all is not lost. Ravens can still have a very strong year and accomplish basically all of their goals. And looking forward to being 1 week closer next week. Roster set. Come and talk on the board, see what moves happen in the corresponding days. You can expect the Ravens front office to be busy. Come check out the latest articles from Mike and Jamie. And thanks for listening, and we'll catch you again next week. Take care.